Thanks for joining us. I'm Aaron Tomlinson, and he is,
I am Derrick Day.
yeah.
And how are you, Aaron?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I got to be honest. I always set like New Year's stuff, resolution stuff like that, but I really set intention at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and I'm doing great, man. We're just a month in, and I feel great. How are you doing?
And I could say the same thing. I started on this weight loss and re-fitness journey, and frankly, I'm kicking ass, man.
Yeah, you are. You really are. You're doing great.
And and then for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, they threw down a challenge for 100 push-ups a day or 2,800 push-ups during the month of February. So I'm proud to say that this is February 3rd. I'm 3 days in. I've done 300 push-ups. I'm in, man. I'm
I'm not gonna comment. That's awesome for you. That's incredible. I mean, really,
it,
that's
it is.
yeah.
And the thing is, man, I'm almost 61 years
Dude,
old.
I'm laughing because I used to be in that kind of shape.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
just trying to imagine doing that now.
I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting there, and I suspect that after doing push-ups every day, that I'm going to be in pretty, my upper body is going to be in pretty good shape.
Oh
So
yeah, no question.
what's in the glass, man?
So I've just got straight Maker's Mark on the rocks tonight. That's all I got. Nothing fancy.
Yep, same here. Bullet bourbon
Yeah,
on the rocks, nothing
bullets better.
fancy.
Bullets better.
Maker's Mark is not bad. I mean, I usually keep some around here, and I was looking at my liquor cabinet, and it's kind of thin, and I don't know how that happened because my son came for Christmas, and I went on a big liquor purchase, but I think I bought about $500 worth of liquor, and and normally he and I do a lot of drinking when we get together, but we didn't, so. I'm like wondering what happened, and I know I'm not, I didn't drink all of this, but anyway, it just magically disappeared.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens.
I know.
Mm.
So anyhow, we were talking earlier, and sometimes just to give you guys a little insight, excuse me, into me and Aaron's personal conversations is that usually a day or two before the show we get together and we decide what we're going to talk about, and so we kind of flesh that out a little bit. But today was a little last minute, so we kind of I came in today and said, hey, what are we going to do? And Aaron said, I don't know, got a topic? And I said, okay, I think I do. And my topic for tonight is artificial intelligence or AI, because if unless you're living under a rock,
Yeah.
you probably you probably have heard of Chat GPT. And Chat GPT is basically uh, an AI bot that you can prompt with a question or some information, and it will give you some result. And it can do everything up. And I mean, there was an attorney who used the Chat GPT to write a dissertation for his bar exam,
Oh my goodness.
and the instructors passed it,
Wow.
or the governing body, the bar, they passed it.
Wow.
So that's one thing, and AI is influencing our lives in so many ways. Like, for example, Facebook. Facebook is using artificial intelligence to learn our media consumption habits, our buying habits,
Yeah.
how our interaction habits, and it's building models of how to react to that. And basically, for an organization like Facebook, the idea is to be able to sell advertising, because this is how they make money. Well, Google's been doing this for years, and again, I don't know if you guys heard or not, but Google recently had a large round of layoffs. They laid off 12,000 people a week ago.
Yeah.
And I was told that it was an algorithm that decided who stayed and who went. In other words, AI was used to determine people's jobs, their livelihoods. And then, you know, many of you know I drive a Tesla, or it's one of my cars, but I drive it's the one that I really like. And it has AI. Matter of fact, I went to the store right before going on, and I went there to get some lottery tickets. And so I said, well, traffic's not too bad. I said, I think I'll let the car drive home. So I punch in the navigation, say home, hit the gear shift, the gear shift stalk twice, and boom, car takes off, starts doing this thing. And it was I turned it on while I was at a light in the left turn lane. Light turned green, car started moving, my car started moving. It looked both ways, made the left turn, and came up to my street. Now, here's where it's not so perfect, right? Because when it turned into my neighborhood, I don't know why, it turned into my neighborhood like my son turns into my neighborhood, which is really, really fucking fast and hot, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the things he'll make that turn fast, but then it'll slow down because, you know, this is a residential area. Well, the Tesla didn't do that. The speed limit was 45 on the street that I was on, turning into my neighborhood. And it immediately started accelerating back up to 45.
Oh my goodness.
So fortunately, you could control that because there are these little buttons on the steering wheel, like little scroll wheels, and one of them will control your speed, right? So I scroll it down real quick down to 20 miles an hour, and it's okay. So the thing is that it did it. It drove the 1.1 miles from the gas station where I go to get lottery tickets to my house, no problem, except for that. So it's not perfect. And then, I mean, you know, artificial intelligence, they're using artificial intelligence to determine, you know, whether or not a patient may develop cancer, or how to predict insurance claims for your car insurance, and all these other things. So that's kind of the setup. AI is a way of life, but I have a mind-bending aspect to this that I'm going to introduce later. I'm not going to spoil the show by introducing that now, but I'm going to talk about that later. But Aaron, I'm going to kick it over to you. What do you think about AI?
Well, I don't know what to think, Derrick, because and you know, I hate to say it, but I remember several years ago, Leonard Sweet, who's a name that people may or may not know, he wrote a lot of stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s to help churches adapt to culture. That was kind of his wheelhouse.
Yeah. Okay. I remember now. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And he talked about in one of his books this idea that, of course, this is back late 90s. Okay. So I'm dating myself. But he talked about this idea that the world changed with the Beatles, and you know, whenever they showed up on the scene, what was that, 64? Am I getting that right? You know,
Yeah.
I don't know, a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
And he had this idea that people born prior to 1964 were immigrants to the current world, and people born after 1964 were natives. And I remember being a, you know, much younger man then, and I was a native, you know, and I would look at these old farts.
Hey, smile when you say old fart.
Right. And I would think, bless your hearts, you know, you don't know anything about the world. And now change is happening so rapidly. Like, I mean, there have been so many studies done about how we are experiencing more change in our lifetimes than any other generation known to man. I remember Leonard Sweet in the same book, he talked about how back then, you know, in the late 1990s, just to help people, this is before 9/11. This is, you know, the internet's just starting to take off. We're still on dial-up, you know?
Yeah.
And cell phones didn't have screens. They were big, monstrous things back
Yep.
then, just to kind of help give people some appreciation for this. But he talked about how at that point in time, there was more information available in one edition of the New York Times. People were still reading newspapers. I was still reading the newspaper back in the 90s. There was more information in one edition, one daily edition of the New York Times than people in the 1800s, early 1900s would have been exposed to in their entire life.
Mm.
When I started counseling, when I started counseling college students, I would get these guys that didn't know how to date. That's the reason they were coming. Like,
Yeah.
never been with a girl, didn't know anything about dating, and they're asking me, and I'm like, shit, I don't know, man. it's been way too long. You know what I mean? So I picked up this book to read. That's written to guys to help them. Not quite the pickup artist, sleazy thing, but it was a good book, just designed to help guys. And one of the things I said in there with dating apps that women now, in a week will get more invitations if they're relatively attractive. Even they'll get more invitations on dates and lunches and dinners and whatever than someone like Marilyn Monroe would have gotten in her whole life.
Mm.
So we're being inundated with this massive amount of change, and I'm clearly an immigrant to this world, and that's pre-AI. I've read about AI. And I don't know, man. The potential for good that's there, like you said, I think is great. But I've also noticed just in my lifetime a total dehumanization with the introduction of the technology age that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And people are so much more disrespectful. They're so much more quick to fire off and get into fights or shoot you, or mass shootings. And I don't know, man. I don't know how to feel about AI, to be honest. I mean, this is more your wheelhouse certainly than mine. But when I sit back and think about it, and I think about the world that my kids are inheriting, and every generation says this. I remember the old guys saying this when I was coming up in my teens and 20s. And now I guess I'm one of those old guys. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know about the trajectory that we're on. I worry. One thing I worry about, Derrick, is, and I saw this just recently, even before you suggested the topic, I saw a thing on Twitter where there was this podcast. I didn't listen to it. I didn't know we were going to talk about this tonight, but the title of the podcast was AI is coming for your job.
Yep. And I'm going to get to that.
And so I don't know what to think. I'll be honest with you.
Well, this is funny because I went on Chat GPT and I asked Chat GPT to develop to give me an algorithm, a predictive algorithm that would and I told it a type of stock analysis, and I'm not going to say what that is because I want to try this algorithm and see if it works first.
Yeah, good idea. Don't put that up.
But basically, it gave me a Python language script that it could be used as an object in a let's say a program that goes out and scans stocks and basically picks winners and losers based on this particular predictive analysis, right? And it just gave it to me, like, I mean, free, right? And I was really amazed by this because it's like, what else can it do? But there were things that I was reading something earlier this morning, and we're talking about how Chat GPT's model is basically taught that like an attorney is an older white male. and a flight attendant is an attractive young female. And this is part of its training. So these are some biases that people have been able to find in the Chat GPT, right? And also they said that there are some other AI engines that have been used to generate some really horrific racial and sexual responses. Things that even the worst human might not do. Because this is what it understands from its training model. And that's the thing. Like so in my line of work, we deal with machine learning and artificial intelligence. Machine learning basically says I'm going to observe interactions between people and machines, machines and machines, interactions between people and markets, people and products, and based on this, now I can say, okay, I want to apply some an AI model to this, to the machine learning that says, okay, based on what I know about this universe, to do this. I was speaking of Tesla, that when what a lot of people may not realize is that the plant in California where they first started building Teslas was once a joint venture. That plant, that building, that facility was once a joint venture between General Motors and Toyota, where they built small cars together. The Pontiac Vibe, the Toyota Corolla, the Geo Prism, and others that came out of that plant. And so anyway, once Musk and company got hold of that plant, they decided that they were going to do most of this with automation. So what they did is they purchased robots to do things like painting and welding, things that are dangerous for people to do.
Yeah.
And what they did is they brought the robots in, and then they brought like a master car painter or a master welder. And the master welder or master car painter taught the robots. Basically, the robots use machine learning to learn from the master, and then they use AI to apply it. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because as Tesla began to expand their operations, building more product lines and all of this other stuff, they would buy more robots to do more work. But instead of bringing in the master humans to teach the robots, they just put the new robots in the presence of the old robots.
Right.
And they watched and learned. And then they did it better than the original robots. They're able to continuously improve. So when we talk about AI and job loss, right? Like we already know that in manufacturing, automation has taken away. I don't want to say taken away jobs. It has replaced them, because it's not some. Basically, automation is how can we improve on a process and remove human error, right? And so what we call that in my line of work is we want to reduce the number of fingers on keyboards.
Sure.
So if we can reduce the number of fingers on keyboards, we reduce the number of human-induced errors, and we get a more efficient process. So we know that things like manufacturing, welding, painting, things like that, placing panes of glass in auto bodies, things like that, the robots do very well. And so if you're in that line of work, you should be concerned, right? Because automation could replace it could displace what you're doing. But one of the things that like Chat GPT is showing, things like paralegals who write briefs for attorneys. That is a job that could wind up going away.
Right.
Or like computer programmers. There's equal parts of art and science that go into computer programming, right?
Right.
but if you teach the machines how to make better code, they'll make more efficient code than the humans do,
Right.
and then that replaces them. So what I tell people is that if you have a a soft skill, for example, you're a carpenter, you're a sculptor, you're a painter. Um, chances are, if you're a plumber, an electrician, chances are you're not going to find a robot that's going to replace that. There's no automation to replace that. But I'm going to say this, and I'm going to stop talking for a minute because I can really ramble on with this. But
No,
there's a program, I think it's called Lisa AI, that basically you could tell it, you can give it a prompt, and it'll draw a picture for you. You know, you can tell it, hey, I want a superhero that's green and can fly in space, and it'll draw it, right, and render it very nicely. Or you could say, please take my picture and touch it up. And it's funny because what I was reading in the same article this morning, they said that artificial intelligence that does drawing has a tendency to hypersexualize people because that's its model, right? So, there are things. So there are a lot of things. So we talked about. I was talking about artists, painters, sculptors, even those. Like let's say you give you teach a machine to replicate Michelangelo's David, and then you give it a slab of marble. And what is it going to do? I mean, is it going to capture not just the all of the intricate detail of David, but is it going to capture the emotional content that je ne sais quoi that people get when they see it, right? And so there's there's a lot there. And I could really go on with this, but I want to kick it over to you, man. I want
well,
to hear your thoughts.
yeah. I mean, at the risk of being dystopian here, I mean, there's so much that you threw out there, starting with the stock market. I mean, the consumer investor, the guy on Main Street, he's already getting screwed. He's already. I mean, I remember when I started investing. I read what's that classic work, "The Intelligent Investor" by who's that guy, Benjamin. Anyway, it's a classic. It's
Yeah.
it's what Warren Buffett, recommended to everybody, and he built his fortune on. And the idea was, basically it's a crash course on how to evaluate a business, whether or not it's going to be profitable, and then make your decisions based for the long term, buy and hold, based on the profitability of a business, right?
Mhm.
Anymore, the stock market is being, I don't want to say manipulated because I don't think that's the right word, but you've got these big firms that are selling mutual funds and ETFs and whatever, and they don't even have managers anymore. They don't have to. I mean, it's very easy now. I mean, how many hundreds of mutual funds are out there that you can? Oh yes, yeah. Thank you, Benjamin Graham. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, that they don't charge a lot of fees. I mean, it's very easy to find a Morningstar 5-star mutual fund with high returns and low expenses
Risk. Yeah.
because it's just being completely managed by a computer.
Yep.
And that's existed prior to AI. And so in a lot of ways, I mean, I look at some of these companies, Derrick, and I'm like, your stock price is, your earnings per share are like in the toilet, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But your stock price keeps rising because you're the latest thing. And so even that's become harder to do. And so now you throw AIs into there. And what's going to happen to your financial advisor? What's going to happen? And this is like, I just went through, I haven't talked about a lot, but I just went through some medical issues, had some surgery, been on recovery with it and stuff like that. And it was such an assembly line. It was such an assembly line. I mean, I literally, and I thank God I had a great surgeon. And the fact that all he does is surgery, great. But I literally have talked to the man for 5 minutes. And it's just weird to put your life in, literally your life in the hands of, a surgeon that you just met and an anesthesiologist that you couldn't even bet ahead of time. You try to bet your surgeon, but you can't bet your anesthesiologist. You don't know who the fuck it's going to be until 5 minutes before surgery. And okay, I came out great, got a great result, did fine. But there's that human element of like, we have a pediatrician, and I love to just the fact that she knows us, she knows our family, she knows my boys, she knows their history. There's like this whole holistic piece to it. You know what I mean? And financial advisor is the same way, right? That's easily going to be replaced by AIs and already is being replaced by AIs. Yeah. So that's the stock market piece to it, right? And then jobs, like what job? Like right now, it's just in its infancy. Like I'm telling my kids, hey, get a trade that you can learn that can't be replaced. But what's to say it can't? What's to say with advancements 10 years from now, where are we going to be? What's going to happen to humanity? That's my question, Derrick. Like, and I don't mean to be like too Hollywoodish, and this isn't my wheelhouse by any means, but, and you brought up, the pictures and I started thinking about sexuality. Well, what's going to happen to sexuality when virtual reality sex becomes a full five senses experience? Experience. You see what I'm saying? Like, don't think that that's that far off. And it made me think of, I've mentioned Donald Hoffman and his work several times in different contexts here, but what got him started on the research that he's done, which I think is great research, but what got him started was some beetle in Australia. They were throwing beer bottles, the brown beer bottles, just littering the country of Australia, right? And this beetle was on the verge of going extinct.
Yeah, I remember watching it when you recommended that. That was crazy.
Yeah. Because the beer bottle to the males was more attractive than their female counterparts.
Yep.
And so they were,
humping the bottles.
They were humping these bottles instead of the females. And to save this species, they had to change and, go to clear or green or whatever. Like, you can't have a brown beer bottle in Australia anymore, if I understand correctly. And I mean, I'm not reducing us down to beetles, but what happens when AI can produce a better sexual experience for you than your partner or your spouse or a human being?
Yeah.
Are we in danger of going extinct? Is there going to be a whole generation of AIs 100 years from now that teach their offspring, whatever that looks like, that they evolved from us and we become no more than apes in the history of planet Earth? I mean, do you see where I'm going with this? And again, I don't want to be dystopian, but
no, dude, there's definitely a dystopian. See, let me say this. There are two outcomes for this, two potential end games for this, right? One is grossly dystopian, right? The other is hopefully utopian.
Yeah.
Right? Because and again, another article I was reading this morning, where Google has invested several $billion for using AI to determine irrigation patterns for farming in India. Because basically India is a study in contrast, because in the one part you have the urban areas that are very wealthy, very very well to do, and then you have the rural communities that are there's abject poverty, there's starvation, and a lot of other things. Well, what Google is doing is, okay, how can we use AI to to help predict weather patterns, to predict irrigation, and all this to help to produce a better crop yield that will help reduce starvation and sickness in India, and also by using AI to manage water control in irrigation, that you can also deal with things because, like for example, in India, again in the cities, everything is very urban, everything's very well developed. But again, you get out into the countryside, and you have like ditches where there's raw sewage, right? And so basically dealing with this with AI will help to control that, contain that, and so it becomes less of a health issue, right? Less of a health threat. And so I was listening to some of this guy in England who developed an AI company that Google eventually bought, and basically this this AI company, one of the things that it did is there's this Chinese game called Go, and it's supposed to be more nuanced and more complex than chess. And so they built an AI machine that was able to beat the best human Go player. And so they're using game theory to basically, what this guy has in mind is sort of like a socialist utopia where the resources are managed by AI, and people don't, so to your point about jobs and what people will do, well, the AI will take care of the basic needs, food, housing, medical care, that sort of thing. And then people are free to express themselves creatively. But that's the utopian viewpoint. But the dystopian part is, okay, so what if the AI decides at some point that the human component is no longer necessary?
Right, which is the stuff of Hollywood movies, right? But maybe they're being prophetic.
It
but
is.
Go ahead, continue.
But let's just say that the AI were to develop a strain of COVID that was far more efficient than the strains that we've already been exposed to.
Right.
Now, I have to caveat this as I say it, because I know there's some people, there are people that watch us that, they might be prone to conspiracy theories, and I don't want to create one.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
But the reality is that that this could be used for good, or it can be used for evil, for lack of a better term. I hate that term evil, but not
benefit or benevolent. Benevolence or malevolence, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a better way of putting it.
Creation or destruction, right?
Exactly. And so that's the thing. There's a song by Donald Fagen. It was on his first solo album, The Nightfly, called IGY. What a beautiful world this could be.
Right.
What a glorious time to be free. Right. And that song talks about this idealized world, right?
Yeah.
Where machines make the decisions and there's more leisure for artists.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the holy grail of this. That's the positive end game, the benevolent end game. But the malevolent end game is, okay, what happens? Let's say that we're not able to rein this in before AI gets out into the wild, right? Then what happens?
Right.
It goes underground and it evolves and develops and learns more. So it's one of these things that, on the one hand, it has such great potential to revolutionize humanity, to take the burden of work off humanity and things like that, so that we can actually be human instead of drones. But the flip side of it is that, if machines are able to create better art, They're able to reason and apply logic better. That they're able to create their own art. Um, what happens then? What happens when you get to the point where it's no longer controllable? Which that brings me to my next point, but I'm going to kick it back to you, and I'll come
Well,
back to
so
you.
here's where my mind goes, and I was googling this to find the guy's name while you were talking. Um, Al, I don't know how if I'm gonna pronounce his last name right. Hold on one second. Sorry, Al Bielek. You heard of him?
No,
Probably.
actually, I haven't.
I don't know. Bielek. I think I'm saying that right. So you know about the Philadelphia experiment, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Al Bielek was a guy in the 1990s after the movie came out. So you know you got to take it with a grain of salt. Um, but he claimed to have been one of the seamen. Am I getting that right, Derrick? I want to make
Yep,
sure.
that's right.
I want
That's
to
right.
make sure I got it right. Uh, that was on the ship when the ship disappeared, right?
Yep.
And rather than invisibility, he claims that they traveled forward in time. And as I was listening to you talk, I remember reading about his story where he said that they traveled forward in time, and he talks about a world that's run by AI.
Mm,
And everyone is so AI essentially becomes like God in his version of the future, where people are even telepathically linked to this sort of central computer that governs and rules over society. I like the idea of a socialistic society where AI they're taking all the hits. Let's put it
yeah.
that way. You know what I mean? And humanity is free to uh, self-actualize. Let's just put it that way,
Yeah. To
right?
be human.
Yeah, I love that idea. Um, as it sits now, we live in a nation that, I mean, honestly, I wish we could go back to the New Deal policies of FDR at the very least. I think Ronald Reagan fucked the country over. I know that's not going to make my conservative friends very happy, but I would be happy to sit down with you, my conservative friends, and have a conversation with you and hear you out. And then hopefully you'd hear me out. But, since Ronald Reagan, the gap between the haves and the have nots, let's just say it that way,
Hmm.
is increasingly wide. And so the current trajectory that we're on politically, economically, at least in this nation, and I'm speaking strictly as an American here, uh, you know, if they can get you to work for 8, 9, 10, hell, even what does a Amazon driver start out with? $22 an hour or something
Yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
And they keep making their investors rich, which I already talked about how they're already kind of excluding the average investor. You know what I'm saying? They just make
Yep.
these firms wealthier and wealthier. Imagine what they could do with AI. So then what do you have? Do we have another revolution, like the French Revolution?
Yeah.
You know, you got people sitting at the top with their AI saying, let them eat cake. Um, I don't know. My mind just spins off in a million different directions. But I will say this, Al Bielek, or if I'm saying his name right or wrong, he described a more utopian type of society, but definitely a society that was controlled by
Yeah.
AI. And if we have to be controlled about AI, what does that say about us as a species? Eventually, then do we become pets?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like,
I like to stay positive and I like to think positive, but this is where my mind goes when we start talking about these things. And again, I'm an immigrant to this world we live in now. I'm not a native, so I have
yeah,
to learn the culture.
Yeah, you and I both, and you know the one thing for me though is because by nature of my career path,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a citizen. I'm like an ambassador. I'm an
Yeah,
ambassador of one
exactly.
generation to another.
Yeah.
So you know, and I don't think that I'm special or anything, but I have a unique purview,
No,
and
I love that. I think that's very accurate.
yeah.
You're an ambassador. I totally agree. So I want to hear your thoughts on it. Like I said, this isn't my wheelhouse. This is more
Well,
yours.
this is one of the things. This is the mind fuck that I want to throw out there, and you and I talked about this earlier, so it won't be foreign to you, but
Right.
it's going to be something that everybody that hears this, they're going to have to really consider this because imagine if there is a God.
Yeah.
If there is a God, then we are artificial intelligence to it. And let's say that suppose that through our intelligence and our growth intellectually, that we come to the realization that there is no need for this God. So then what happens to that God? And then to flip the script a little bit, there are philosophers who will say that we have made God in our image.
Right.
Well, let's say that you know AI, we create AI, AI learns from us, AI learns to better us, AI learns to master us, and then AI becomes God. And this all my buddy Marshall Stooks will love this because he's into the Matrix in a big way. But the whole premise behind the Matrix is that humanity created these machines, created this artificial intelligence. This artificial intelligence said, well, humanity's really not good for anything except to give us power,
Yep.
literal power, like
Yep.
where humans become batteries
Hmm.
for the AI machine. And so again, what happens? Okay, let's say that that we are able to nip this in the bud
Hmm.
and stop AI in its tracks and say, okay, this is a bad idea. Let's shit can the whole thing, right? How much of that survives? And if it survives and it's learning, and let's say that it develops some level of sentience. So now it has some emotional content and it develops a thirst for revenge. Now what? Right? We now have this ongoing chess game between humanity and AI. And so again, you know, I think of this in terms of my atheistic self, right? That I've come to the conclusion that there is no God and that there is certainly no need for a God. But what if the God what if we're in our AI to that and our arriving at that conclusion poses some sort of threat to this God, to this creator. I mean, you know, like basically it's like you know, taking a picture in a mirror, right? Like where you take your cell phone and you aim it at a mirror and it just kind of, you know, goes on into infinity kind of thing. And this is what this is, that there I don't think that anybody can predict AI. uh, the potential end game of this. Where does this go? Where do we land with this? I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, we're already. I think that we're already at the age of reason, the age of enlightenment, the age where religion as we understand it, comes to an end. I think we're either in the early stages of that or on the cusp of it. But that's something that ultimately will happen. But if that happens, does that mean that we're destroying God? That we're artificial intelligence that's destroying the intelligence that created us? And if that's the case, does that mean that what we create will ultimately destroy us? Is this an endless cycle of destruction?
Let me just say, I love the thought experiment. My mind goes a million different directions with it. As a quote unquote, and I'm quoting myself, self-trained religious scholar.
Yep, me too.
You're talking about what the Gnostics were saying 2,000 years ago about the story of the Garden of Eden. That, God created Adam and Eve and put them in there. And rather than seeing the serpent as the deceiver that brought the horrors of mankind, they interpret the story as God created these servants, if you will, which is what we're talking about. So what does that make us, right? Yeah. Like, we want to create this artificial intelligence, just make our life simpler so we can just sit and reach our self-actualization. When you flip the script, Gnostics would interpret that story as the serpent is the liberator of mankind. God knows the day you eat of this tree, you'll be like him, knowing good and evil. And that was just the beginning of the growth of their intelligence, right? So it implies this sort of fear that the God depicted in the story has, that his creation will overtake him. So, I mean, why else fear that, right? Why else say don't eat here? And so I guess we're talking about something, Derrick, when you really get down to it, we're talking about something that has been on mankind's mind for at least thousands of years.
Yeah.
Right? This whole concept, this whole idea. And but one of the things that I've been contemplating, and I want to just offer a different way of thinking about this. I mean, there's so many different directions we could go with this, right?
Yep.
So then do we become God to the AIs, and then did the AIs become God to us? According to Al, I don't know if there's any validity to his story at all. I'm just throwing it out there as a possible potential future for humanity, where we're serving the AI because they've usurped us in that sense. And the master has become the slave, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many ways to take that thought experiment. But there's an alternative. Here's my frustration with the whole atheist argument. We've talked about this a lot. But in my view, and I could very well be wrong, my view is very limited. Let me just say that as a caveat. In my view, the entire Western world is held captive to the presuppositions about deity that we inherited from Judeo-Christian and Abrahamic faiths.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I mean. Since the Council of Nicaea, the predominant belief about God, does God exist, does God not exist, and God in creation, is that God created everything, as they say in the Latin, ex nihilo, which translates to out of nothing or from nothing.
Yep.
Which means that God is completely separate from his creation. Take this all the way back to whatever scientist or philosopher, I forget now, who came up with the idea that God was a great watchmaker. Indifferent, as you would say, just created the watch and sits there and watches it wind down. But God is not in the watch, or God is not the watch.
Right.
There are other philosophies. There are other more ancient Western philosophies. There are contemporary Eastern philosophies that insinuate that creation began with a monad, with a single unit. So Big Bang theory.
Yep.
Single point of energy that expands and becomes diversity. So that God, as we call it, is not dealing with his creation ex nihilo, out of nothing, or separate them, which we would be from artificial intelligence, even though we didn't create it out of nothing. We're not in the artificial intelligence experiencing the artificial intelligence as the artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence isn't experiencing us as itself. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we have this really deeply ingrained presupposition when we talk about these arguments of theist, atheist, deist, whatever. We are still being governed, even atheists, I would argue, are still being governed by the presuppositions of Christianity since the Council of Nicaea. What if there's a different possibility? And I'm getting off the topic of AI, but I was thinking about this because you told me you were going to bring this up. That whatever we call God, that single monad at the beginning diversified itself, whether you want to say it's energy that diversified itself and evolved, or you want to call it God diversified itself and evolved. Now we're having a completely different discussion about the existence of God. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. I'm with you. You know, and this really, I'm really digging this conversation, and there's so many different ways that it could go. You know, so like you were talking about ex nihilo, you know, that God is outside of something that he created out of nothing. But there's the Eastern thing is that creation and creator are inseparable. And that's the yin and yang, right? That creator, creation, destruction, that they're all part of a single cycle. And I don't know, you know, it could be. I mean, let's just throw it out there that the Bible, that the Quran, that the Torah are all just simply stories of how AI was created and rebelled against its creator.
Yeah. I mean maybe we're caught in these what do you call them? Fractals, right?
Yeah.
These spiraling patterns that just keep repeating themselves over and over and over again. And now it's our turn to be God. Maybe when people are saying I am God, they don't realize what they're saying. They're just saying, hey, we're going to create something else that's going to usurp us.
Yeah. And if you think about it, right, you know, from the atheistic viewpoint, you know, or not atheistic, let's say the humanity meets deist perspective. I am God. You know, I create my reality. Okay. You create your reality. But you know, this goes back to what we were talking about this last week, talking about wave functions collapsing, right? That I am God, but I'm agreeing with an overarching wave function that that collapses into something that multiple people can observe.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, this really gets deeply cerebral, and I see. I mean, man, we could go in a lot of different ways with this, but what I want to do right now, because we're coming up on close to time, and I know you've got some other stuff that you need to do, but do we have time for comments?
Yeah, I wanted to refer to that actually because I just happened to look over there and I saw Sonic Grace on YouTube. AI would have to be conscious. It is not. And it seems like Sonic Grace, thank you for commenting. Really appreciate you interacting. Yeah, but other comments here, God is the source of all life and everything. Everything that exists is in him. And then says AI would have to be conscious. It is not. And I understand. Well, I hear you. But here's my question. How do we define what is conscious and what is not conscious?
Yeah.
How do we define what is conscious and what is not conscious? What does it mean to be conscious? So I would just throw that out to you if you're still on Sonic Grace. What does it mean to be conscious? Because we can't say something is not if we don't clearly define in a descriptive, specific way what conscious is. And I would love to hear your thoughts, Sonic Grace, on what conscious means to you.
Well, while we were talking, I put something up there. I was reminded of a movie that I saw years ago called Demon Seed.
Mm.
And Demon Seed was basically this guy creates a supercomputer, and the supercomputer develops sentience. And basically he begins to develop an affinity for its creator's wife. And so the machine chemically figures out how to reproduce, and basically the AI is controlling the whole house, right? Locks this woman in a room, rapes her, and impregnates her.
Oh my goodness.
And so the result is this baby, and the spoiler alert, that when the baby comes out, the baby looks up and says, "I live."
Wow. Yeah. I mean, to flesh that out a little bit as far as where I'm coming from in that perspective. If you are self-conscious, you're conscious. In other words, if you have an awareness of self,
yeah.
If you can think and you can feel and you can reflect back on how you're thinking and feeling and make choices, what's to say that AI can't do that?
Yeah. I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Rene Descartes, his great
Cogito ergo sum.
Yep. I mean, let's see. Ben Urban says deists give credence to a prime mover who's skedaddled and simply spectates human beings' sovereignty for better or for worse.
Okay, Ben, that's a good thought, but let's just say hypothetically that what was created usurped the creator. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not disagreeing with you, Ben. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, here's another. Again, we have these discussions, Derrick, within the confines of Western thought, influenced by Christianity for 2,000 years. So we automatically assume if there is a God, that God is omnipotent, that God is omnipresent, and that God is omniscient, all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-present, right? Yeah. But what if, just like we're sitting here, and we could possibly create something that could go out beyond our power and intelligence and presence to deal with it? So where I'm at right now as I'm talking. So I'm externally processing.
Yeah.
Just because we presuppose a creator, an origin, a source, or a God, if you will, does not mean that we have to also presuppose that this God is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. And what if there was a creator, but our creator is not those things? Then that would explain some things about the origin of evil and why, God, the creator, doesn't have meticulous control over situations and isn't emptying cancer wards of children and stuff like that, because we're projecting onto God these Judeo-Christian ideas that God can just do anything and everything. And what if God is evolving? What if we're all God evolving? And again, it's semantics, right? Because God is kind of an outdated word, to be honest. It's outdated.
Let me give you another scenario, right? Because this is something from a computer science class that I took in college, right? That we had to develop this simulation, right? And so everyone had the basic code, right? The structure for what needed to be created. But the catch is that once we set it in motion, we could no longer touch it. We had to let it play out for the
Yeah.
duration of the assignment, right?
Yeah.
And then what we had to do is we had to go back and assess what happened, do an assessment of the events that transpired during the simulation. And so, again, going back to the whole matrix theory of life, right? The Matrix, the movie, that, that if this is some sort of, and again, I don't want to give fuel to the conspiracy theorists out there, but what if this is like, okay, the whole watchmaker theory works with the simulation. In other words, the watchmaker makes the watch, he winds the watch, and then he watches it run, right? He's never changing the time, never winding it, never doing anything. He's made it, he's done. Now his role is simply to observe it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I want to reply to Sonic Grace. Thank you, Sonic Grace. Replying, God is love. Can AI love? Let me ask you again, what is love? How do we define love? It's self-aware, but can it be aware of the needs of others? Clearly, because Derrick asked it for an algorithm that would meet his needs for the stock market, and it produced it. So clearly it can be aware of the needs of others. I think that's self-evident. So then my question would be, how do we define love? People define love in different ways. Love is one of those slippery words. Like, it's not.
Watch this. There's actually, and this is something that I came to, is that love at its elemental components is empathy and compassion. So the thing is, can AI be empathetic? Can it? Okay, certainly it can observe the human experience and say, okay, what is it? What is the human experience like? Now, it can never completely understand it, but it can have empathy toward it, right? It can say, I want to see the human experience through the eyes of the human, right? Yeah. And so mathematically, it can exhibit empathy. It can do that. And then compassion just simply says, I care, I give a fuck, right? Well, that's a little bit more nebulous, but I think that the machine could actually say, well, the humans need to be fed, they need to be housed, they need to have health care, they need to have fulfillment, and if AI can provide all of those things autonomically, can you say it has compassion? So if it can have empathy and compassion in those components, then at the basic elemental level, that this thing can love.
Right. I think we have to expand the argument beyond what we've known of technology, because AI is a game changer. So what we've known of technology is it's just a set of wires and sand and whatever else goes into it. You'd know better than I would.
Yep.
That just we dictate to. But when we're talking about AI, we're talking about something that is totally other than that. We're talking about something that can think. We're talking about something that can learn. We're talking about something that may be able to become self-reflective, right?
Yeah.
So the idea, I get it from a Christian perspective. Life is organic in the sense that we know it. Like it was here before here's our problem. We don't understand our presuppositions that get programmed into us really early on, because we didn't start this world, man. We came into this world. We came into a world with grass and trees and rivers and mountains and other people, and societies and democracies and religion and ideas about God and all this stuff. And we download all that stuff. We absorb all that stuff. It's a proven fact that your brainwave pattern for the first 7 years of your life is the same brainwave pattern that a person goes into who is extremely susceptible to suggestion under hypnosis.
Wow.
That's a proven fact. And so you are literally being hypnotized for the first 7 years of your life about things that we don't even think about. And so we assume that life has to be this organic thing, or consciousness has to be what we experience consciousness as. And what we're dealing with now is something that's a total game changer, right? Like completely, we have to think in completely different ways. And you cannot think in a completely different way until you challenge your presuppositions and get outside of your paradigms. And your presuppositions are those things that you've been programmed with hypnotically in the first 7 years. So, of course, it's easy. It's very mentally easy to sit there and say, well, consciousness is only that which organically lives. But when you break down the components of consciousness, what is it? It's self-reflective. It's aware of others. It has empathy. It has compassion. What's to say that we cannot program those things into something that electronically? And guess what? The Matrix had it right. We're a battery. We're an electrical engine. I mean, your brain operates off electricity, electrical energy. So what's to say we can't take energy and breathe life into something else? And then we have to ask a different ethical question. Not just what's this going to do to humanity, but then how do we relate to these AIs that we have created? Do we become their slave masters? Or do we become coexistent with them? And then you want to bring God into the equation and say, well, but God, created us in his image, and this is how we're supposed to be, and whatever and whatever and whatever. But who's to say that this other thing can't be an expression of what you define God as? So we've got to get out of these boxes and and this is what I hate about religion, Derrick. And I'm obviously, you can tell I'm getting worked up here, but this is what I hate about religion. We think in boxes because we think in presuppositions, and we never question those presuppositions. We never challenge those presuppositions. And here's what religion does: it raises the stakes. Yep. I'm going to tell you something, man. Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation fucked us over in the brain because it taught us that whatever we believe determines our existence. Your faith in whatever there is about a God becomes an existential crisis, because if you don't believe, you're not justified and you're going to go to hell. Well, who wants that? So now we've raised the stakes about something, which is our thinking and our believing and our abilities, to something that it should never have been raised to. And if you want to tell, if I were going to tell you what is the biggest dehumanizing perpetration upon people that has caused the most religious trauma, it is making belief systems about philosophical realities that cannot be, as you would say, measured and repeated, and putting such high stakes on them that you'll either cease to exist or you'll exist in eternal conscious torment because you didn't believe in a historical Jesus and an event, someone raising from the dead, that you've never experienced, that goes totally contrary to everything you know about nature and reality. But if you don't believe that, you're damned to hell.
And so you brought up a really good point, because here's the thing. We get into these boxes, right? And we think that this is how it should be.
Yes.
Instead of assuming that, here's an example, right? We say life happens. Mm-hmm. Life happens. We don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what's in the next frame of life. Correct. We don't. We have no clue, right? So we have to keep a certain measure of mental fluidity, right? Yep. To accommodate the changes that happen. But we demand this certainty.
Yep.
And so religion gives us that certainty. And again, I think that part of the whole thing about AI, and this is what I'm going to say, and then Ben is waiting in the green room. Right. I think that we need to learn to kind of hold on to the wheel loosely, right? If you've ever driven a race car or anything, you're taught to be in control of the vehicle. But if the vehicle loses control, once you have determined that this thing is out of control, your best bet for survival is to take your hands off the wheel and let physics do the work, right? So that's that. To your point, Aaron, that's exactly what we need to get out of these boxes and get out of this need to control. And so when I say this about AI is there's a lot that could go wrong, and there's a lot that can go right. But I think that we need to set the course, right? Determine the direction that we want to go, and then kind of hold on to the wheel loosely in the event that we need to issue a correction. But if it goes completely out of our control, that we have to let go so that we don't get permanently harmed.
Yeah.
And Ben Urban is here.
Hey guys.
What's up, Ben? You need to get a ring light, man.
Yeah. Let me just respond to Sonic Grace real quick. He's he or she says, I can't speak for religion. I died once and met God. He looked like a sun, only a million times brighter. The knowledge and source of everything flowed from him. So I'm one that definitely wants to honor people's personal experiences. The problem with personal experiences, and I've shared very openly on this program, I can't be an atheist because of my personal experiences, but I also realize I can't expect people to be persuaded by my personal experiences. So here's what I mean by that. I've looked at a lot of near-death experiences and encounters that other people have had. I've never had that. If I'd had that, I'm sure I would hold on to it with everything I had because it would be my experience. But, you can just search on YouTube. You can find an atheist who was Jewish who died for 18 minutes and met God, and God told him that Moses was the true prophet and you needed to follow the Torah, and he became a rabbi. You can find many people who were atheists and converted to Christianity. You can find other people that were Hindu and were atheists and converted to devotion of their Hindu gods. You can find, Muslims who were taken into heaven and saw light and felt unconditional love while they were dead. And they were told there's no prophet except for Allah. So for the rest of us that haven't had those experiences, it becomes quite confusing. And so again, if again, to the high stakes here, if God is going to say, you get it right in this life or damn you to hell, well, he's sure making it complicated.
Yeah.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, Aaron. Derrick.
Sorry, I get a little fired up.
No, you're really on it. This talk has really been something because I don't think much about AI a lot of the time, but just what you guys have been talking about, it's just been like kind of a real eye opener in a way that like things I've thought about before, but like this is like in concentrated fashion. So, whoa.
Oh, dude, we're just scratching the surface. I mean, this is one of those things that it's a rabbit hole without an end.
Yeah. It's crazy though because I've thought about. I remember seeing I forget what it was on some sort of not a documentary, but it was on some channel. I can't remember what it was, but the idea of the show was like the top 10 ways that human beings are gonna become extinct. So it wasn't a happy show right off the bat. But like these are the 10 ways, and I can't remember what all of them were, but I think like intelligent machines was like very high. It might have been the top spot, before black holes, gamma ray bursts.
Oh, come on! What about
global warming?
all
different stuff. But I think intelligent machines was probably number one, and I was like, okay, well, we've all seen the Terminator and different movies like that, and where we have to be the resistance against what we've created. But I mean, there might be some truth to it. I mean, it's really something like we were talking about since the dawn of time. Maybe we were the intelligent machines against God. Once we realized that we could we could function on our own without any proof
Yeah.
that anybody was actually controlling us. We became self-aware, and
Ben,
it's really fascinating.
Ben, you bring up something that's really interesting to me. Like, why does the axis of our thought process in when we're doing these thought experiments and trying to project out into the future, why does the axis of it become who's dominant and who's not?
Right.
And you know what, that's I think that's uniquely Western perspective, right? Dominant and submissive, right? And it's so funny, like we think about this in relationships, right? Romantic relationships, that there has to be a head and there has to be everything else. And what if, what, you know, and again, to go back to the whole watchmaker theory, what if we're coexistent, right? And let me give you another example, or an even better example. Um, uh, Mary Percy Shelley and Frankenstein,
Mm-hmm.
right? The monster is the monster is sentient. The monster is sensitive, and the monster sees himself as Victor's peer, not his creation.
Yeah.
You know, and so what if we extend the watchmaker theory, that that the watchmaker creates us, but we become the equal, the peer
Right.
of the watch.
Wasn't the Frankenstein story an allegory for Industrial Revolution? I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know that Frankenstein and Dracula were both were novels that were written off a bet.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
because Mary Percy Shelley's husband and Bram Stoker, the three of them were friends. And allegedly the legend goes that they're out sitting by a bonfire, and they all know that they're all literary geniuses, but they're who can write the most terrifying story, and that's how these two stories came about.
Well, I mean, there's something to that, because you think of vampirism and you think of how it drains your energy, your
But both of the stories are allegorical to your
soul,
point.
your life force. It's
Did you also know that Bram Stoker was a member of the Order of the Golden Dawn, which was an occult order in Britain in that day, and he was in the same lodge and an associate of Aleister Crowley?
wow.
Well, so was Mary Shelley's husband.
I think that's correct. I wasn't sure, so I didn't want to speak to that. But yeah, they
Yep.
were occultists. They were all occultists and part of the same Golden Dawn lodge with Aleister Crowley, who, by the way, I think is a great grandparent to George H.W. Bush. But anyway, that's different. That's not a conspiracy theory, by the way. That can be substantiated.
That's just a happy coincidence.
No, his one of his ancestors was consort of Crowley's. It's on record, and was his. So Crowley's. I don't want to speak to it because I don't have the facts in front of me. But if you hold up a picture of, anyway, we'll save that for another time.
Yeah, we can do that.
I do think Aleister Crowley is a ancestor of the Bushes.
Now, you know, that's a good show all by itself. Aleister Crowley. I love, I absolutely love Aleister Crowley. I'll just put it out there.
Yeah. He was in the same lodge as Bram Stoker. Yep. They were not just contemporaries, but they, worshiped together or whatever, did magic together.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Ben, do you have any closing thoughts? Because I got to get Aaron out of here.
Yeah, my wife's out with friends tonight, so I gotta take care of the boys here in a minute.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't have anything else, but yeah, this was a really good talk once again, guys. Thank you for just being who you are and coming up with this great stuff.
Thanks, you, man. You know, we got to get you. We got to get you out here on a regular basis. I mean, you know, some of the content that you put out there is just it's amazing, and I don't share everything only because I don't keep up. You know, you're so far ahead, but I'll see something that really resonates with me, and I try to make sure that I share it because yours is a voice that needs to be heard. Absolutely. So I'm making sure that I get it out there.
Well, speaking of being heard, I'm dropping a spoiler. There's not a definite plan yet, but Daryl and I are in talks again, so we might be putting something together soon.
Awesome.
In a video format, so
that'll be awesome.
Well, cool. And just to throw this out here, Jimmy Ligon, who's been a guest on my podcast, and he's shown up on our podcast or on the Phreology Friday. Jimmy has recorded an entire episode, and Aaron, I've got to share that with you so that you know, so that you can give your thoughts on it. But I think it's very good. I think it's very good, and so you know, I want to expand the whole, you know, Phreology concept.
Let's build the kingdom, man.
Exactly, man. I mean,
you know what? I'd be interested. I'd really like to see Jimmy and Tommy Stewart do something together.
That would, you know,
I think that would be a really good combo.
God damn it, Ben. You know, if
I'm putting it out into the universe, so
yeah, you know,
if
you'll have
either
to
one is here or both,
idea.
That'd be great.
So anyway, Ben, thanks a lot for joining in. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut off your camera and then I'm going to give it over to Aaron so he can do our closing. But thanks a lot, man. Love you, man. Tell Beth we say hey, and that's it, man.
I love you guys. Have a good night.
Love you too, man. Later, man.
All right, Aaron.
All right, everybody.
Thing, brother.
Thank you for coming to our TED Talk. Beware the AI.
AI is coming. Need a towel? No.
Honestly, everybody that watched, everybody that was watching later, bless you. Thank you, Derrick. I love you. You're my brother. And peace and hair grease, man.
All right.